London, September 1848. The office of Mr. Pemberton, solicitor, smelled of leather and old paper and desperation. Charlotte Hartwell sat with her hands folded in her lap, spine straight, eyes fixed on a point just above the solicitor's head. 3 weeks since her father's death. 3 weeks since the creditors had begun circling like vultures. 3 weeks since her aunt had informed her, with all the warmth of a magistrate reading a sentence, that arrangements had been made. "You should be grateful," Aunt Marguerite said now, settling her considerable bulk into the chair beside Charlotte. She did not look at her niece. "In your situation, Charlotte, you can hardly afford to be particular." Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat, his discomfort palpable. He was a kind man, Charlotte thought, or tried to be. But kindness had limits when faced with the practicalities of ruin. "Miss Hartwell," he began gently, "the gentleman has reviewed the terms and finds them acceptable. He understands that there is no dowry, no settlement of any kind. He asks only that you be willing to relocate to his property in Surrey, and that you enter the marriage in good faith." "Good faith?" Aunt Marguerite repeated with a sharp laugh. "The girl has no choice but good faith. She brings nothing to this arrangement except herself, and precious little value in that. 24 years old, no prospects, a family name now synonymous with bankruptcy." She turned to Charlotte for the first time. "You will sign those papers and thank Providence that any man was willing to take you on." Charlotte felt the words land like blows, each one carefully aimed. She had heard variations of them for weeks now. The shock had long since faded, leaving only a dull, persistent ache. "I understand my situation, Aunt," she said quietly. Her voice did not shake. She would give them that much, at least. She would not break where they could see it. Mr. Pemberton pushed the contract across his desk. The paper was expensive, the handwriting precise. Marriage contract between Charlotte Elizabeth Hartwell and James Ashford, Esquire. She did not read beyond the names. What difference would the details make? She signed. The pen scratched against paper, and she thought absently that this was what it sounded like when one signed away a life. "Excellent," Aunt Marguerite said, rising with an air of finality. "When does the gentleman arrive?" "He should be here momentarily." Mr. Pemberton replied, consulting his pocket watch. "He sent word this morning that—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Charlotte's heart lurched. She had not realized until this moment that some small, foolish part of her had hoped he might not come at all, that this humiliation might at least be postponed. "Come in," Mr. Pemberton called. The door opened. Charlotte kept her eyes on her hands, fingers now twisted together in her lap. She heard footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. She heard her aunt's sharp intake of breath, though, whether from approval or disdain, Charlotte could not tell. "Mr. Ashford?" Mr. Pemberton said warmly, moving to greet the newcomer. "Thank you for coming. May I introduce Miss Charlotte Hartwell and her aunt, Mrs. Margaret Hartwell?" Charlotte looked up. The man standing in the doorway was not what she had expected, though in truth she had not known what to expect. He was tall, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. His clothes were simple, a brown coat that had seen wear, trousers of good fabric but no particular fashion, boots that were clean but scuffed. He held his hat in his hands, fingers curled around the brim. But it was his face that arrested her. Not handsome in the classical sense, but striking. Strong features, a mouth that looked as if it might smile easily, though it was not smiling now, and eyes, dark eyes that met hers directly, without calculation or contempt. Just steady. "Miss Hartwell," he said, inclining his head. His voice was deeper than she had anticipated, and unexpectedly gentle. "Mr. Ashford," she managed. Aunt Marguerite stepped forward, already assessing. Mr. Ashford, I trust you understand the terms clearly. My niece has no dowry, no connections of value. She is, however, healthy and capable of managing a household. She has been raised with proper values and will not trouble you with unreasonable expectations. Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she found Mr. Ashford looking at her aunt with an expression she could not quite read. "I understand the terms, Mrs. Hartwell," he said quietly, "and I believe Miss Hartwell is capable of speaking for herself." The room fell silent. Aunt Marguerite's mouth opened, then closed. Mr. Pemberton looked between them with barely concealed interest. Mr. Ashford turned to Charlotte. "Miss Hartwell, do you understand the terms of this arrangement?" She met his gaze. Honesty seemed the only dignity left to her. "I understand that I have no choice, Mr. Ashford," she said. "My family is ruined. If I do not marry, my younger sister and I will be destitute within the month. So yes, I understand the terms. I will come to Surrey. I will be your wife, and I will try not to be more of a burden than necessary." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or possibly pain. "Then we are two, Miss Hartwell," he said softly. She blinked. "I beg your pardon? You say you have no choice. Neither do I." He glanced at Mr. Pemberton. "Shall we proceed?" The ceremony was brief. A magistrate was summoned from a neighbouring office. Words were spoken, papers signed. Charlotte heard herself make vows in a voice that seemed to come from very far away. She felt Mr. Ashford's hand, warm and steady, as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. And then it was done. Mrs. Charlotte Ashford, a wife, to a man whose face she had seen for less than an hour. Aunt Marguerite departed without embracing her, without even a farewell. "I trust you will not disgrace us further," was all she said before sweeping from the office. Charlotte stood in the sudden silence, uncertain what happened next. "Mrs. Ashford," her husband said quietly, "I have a carriage waiting. If you are ready, we can depart for Surrey." "I have nothing to collect," she said. "My aunt had my belongings sent ahead yesterday." "Then shall we?" He offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. The carriage was surprisingly comfortable, well sprung and cushioned. Charlotte settled into the seat, and Mr. Ashford, her husband, she corrected herself, took the seat opposite. The door closed. The carriage lurched into motion. London began to slide past the windows. They rode in silence for perhaps 20 minutes before he spoke. "Mrs. Ashford, I want you to understand something." She looked at him, wary. "You will have your own room," he continued, not quite meeting her eyes. "I will not. That is, I do not expect. There is no obligation on your part to—" He stopped, clearly struggling. "This marriage is one of convenience. I will not impose myself upon you." Charlotte stared at him. Of all the things she had expected, kindness had not been among them. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, still not looking at her. They fell back into silence. The afternoon grew cooler as they left the city behind. Charlotte tried not to shiver, but her travelling cloak was thin, and the chill seeped through. Without a word, Mr. Ashford removed his own coat and leaned forward, draping it across her shoulders. "I am fine," she protested automatically. "You are cold," he said simply. "Please." The coat was warm from his body, and it smelled faintly of soap and earth, and something else she could not name. Charlotte pulled it closer, and for the first time in weeks felt something other than despair. "Mr. Ashford," she said softly, "thank you for your kindness." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "James," he said. "When we are alone, you may call me James." "James," she repeated. "Charlotte," he replied, and the way he said her name, gentle, almost tentative, made her think that perhaps a marriage without love might still have something worth holding on to. Perhaps it might have gentleness. Perhaps it might have respect. Perhaps that would be enough. They arrived at the Surrey property as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The house was not what Charlotte had expected. She had imagined something small and weathered, the dwelling of a man who farmed his own land out of necessity. Instead, she found herself looking at a handsome country house, 2 stories of warm stone with ivy climbing the walls and smoke curling from multiple chimneys. "This is your home?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. James helped her down from the carriage. "It is modest by some standards," he said, "but it suits my needs." Modest Charlotte had lived in townhouses smaller than this, but she said nothing, merely following him to the door. It opened before they reached it, and a woman appeared in the doorway. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pinned neatly beneath a cap, and an air of capable warmth. "Mrs. Ashford," James said. "May I present Mrs. Dawson, who manages the household? Mrs. Dawson, my wife, Charlotte." "Mrs. Ashford." Mrs. Dawson's face lit with genuine pleasure. "How wonderful to meet you. Please come in out of the cold. I have tea ready and your rooms are prepared." Charlotte found herself ushered inside, divested of her cloak, and settled into a drawing-room that was both comfortable and unexpectedly refined. The furniture was good quality, the curtains well made, the fire in the hearth burning cheerfully. And Mrs. Dawson, Charlotte watched her pour tea with practiced elegance, noticed the way she moved, the quality of her dress. This was not the housekeeper of a struggling farmer. This was a woman accustomed to running a much grander establishment. "I hope you will be comfortable here, Mrs. Ashford," Mrs. Dawson said, handing her a delicate china cup. "Mr. Ashford has spoken of you warmly." Charlotte glanced at James, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "Has he?" "Indeed, he wanted everything to be welcoming for you." Mrs. Dawson smiled. "If there is anything you need, you have only to ask." That night, Charlotte lay in a bedroom that was far too lovely for a farmhouse. The bed was soft, the linens fine, the windows overlooking gardens that even in twilight looked carefully tended. She stared at the ceiling and tried to reconcile what she had expected with what she had found. James had said it was modest. Perhaps it was, by his standards. Perhaps he came from some minor gentry family and had fallen on difficulties, though not as severe as she had imagined. It did not matter, she told herself. She was grateful simply to have shelter, to have escaped her aunt's cold charity and the spectre of debtor's prison. And if her husband was kind, and he seemed to be kind, then she was luckier than she had any right to expect. The days developed a rhythm. James disappeared each morning, off to tend to whatever business occupied him. Charlotte explored the house and found a library that made her breath catch, 2 walls of books, leather-bound and clearly expensive. She ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in Latin and Greek, collections of poetry and philosophy and natural history. One volume in particular caught her eye, The Origin of Species, a controversial work she had longed to read but never had the opportunity. She pulled it from the shelf and found, on the inside cover, a monogram embossed in gold. J.A. James Ashford. But the quality of the bookbinding, the richness of the leather, these were not the possessions of a simple farmer. She was returning the book when James appeared in the doorway. "I hope you do not mind," she said quickly. "Mrs. Dawson said I was welcome to—" "Of course," he interrupted. "Please, everything here is yours as much as mine. You have an impressive library. I enjoy reading." He moved into the room, running a hand along the desk. "When there is time." "The farming keeps you busy?" she asked, and watched something shift in his expression. "Yes," he said after a moment. The farming. They began to take dinner together. At first, the meals were quiet, stilted, but gradually, conversation emerged. James asked her about her childhood, her education, her interests, and he listened, truly listened, in a way Charlotte could not remember anyone ever doing before. "I always wanted to travel," she confessed one evening, surprising herself with the admission. "To see Rome, Athens, perhaps even Egypt. I used to read everything I could find about ancient civilizations." "Why did you not?" James asked. Charlotte looked down at her plate. "Women of my station do not travel for pleasure, Mr. Ashford. We marry, we manage households, we raise children. Travel is for gentlemen on their grand tours or eccentric blue stockings who scandalize society." "James," he corrected gently, "and it seems to me that society's rules have done you little good. Perhaps they are not worth heeding." She looked up, startled by the quiet rebellion in his words. "Perhaps," she said softly. A week passed, then another. Charlotte found herself relaxing in ways she had not known were possible. The house was peaceful. Mrs. Dawson was warm. And James was a puzzle she could not quite solve. He was educated, clearly, and well-mannered. He had money enough to maintain this household comfortably. Yet he lived simply, worked long hours at some undefined labor, and seemed to want nothing from her except her company at dinner and the occasional conversation in the library. It was the library where everything shifted. Charlotte could not sleep. Too many thoughts crowded her mind. Questions about her new life, worries about her sister, and beneath it all, a growing awareness of her husband that both frightened and intrigued her. She went downstairs in her dressing gown, seeking the comfort of books. The library door was ajar, firelight flickering within. She pushed it open and found James in a chair by the fire, a book in his lap, his expression distant and melancholy. "I apologize," she said. "I did not mean to disturb you." "You are not disturbing me." He closed the book. "Cannot sleep. Too many thoughts. I know the feeling." He gestured to the chair opposite. "Join me." Charlotte hesitated, then settled into the chair. The fire crackled between them, and for a long moment neither spoke. "Charlotte," James said finally, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. Before your father's death, were you happy?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, I think I was. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. My father loved books as much as I do. We would spend hours discussing philosophy and history." She smiled at the memory. "My mother despaired of us both. She said we would have cobwebs in our brains." "She sounds delightful." "She was. She died when I was 16. Charlotte looked into the fire. "After that, it was just father and me and my sister. We were happy in our way. And then father's business partner betrayed him. And everything." She stopped, the familiar grief rising. "I am sorry," James said quietly. "What of you?" she asked, wanting to shift the focus. "You said in the solicitor's office that you had no choice either. What did you mean?" His expression shuttered. "I meant that we all have circumstances that constrain us." "That is not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It is not." Charlotte waited. The fire popped. Finally, James sighed. "I was engaged once," he said. "Several years ago, to a woman I believed loved me. We were to be married in June." He paused, his jaw tight. "That spring I made some poor investments. I lost a considerable sum. Not everything, but enough that my circumstances changed temporarily." "What happened?" "She ended the engagement." His voice was flat, carefully controlled. 3 weeks before the wedding, she sent a letter explaining that she could not, in good conscience, bind herself to a man of uncertain prospects. Within a month, she was engaged to a viscount. Charlotte felt anger flare on his behalf. Then she was a fool. James looked at her sharply. You think so? I think anyone who would abandon you for money alone never deserved you in the first place. The words came out more vehemently than she intended. Love should not be conditional on wealth. If it is, then it is not love at all. Something blazed in James's eyes. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. And what would you know of love, Charlotte? You married me for money. I married you for survival. She corrected. There is a difference. I never claimed to love you. I never deceived you. I signed those papers knowing exactly what I was, a desperate woman with no other choice. But if I had loved you, James, no loss of fortune would have changed it. The silence that fell was different from before, charged, electric. Charlotte, James said, his voice rough. He stood abruptly, crossing to where she sat. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. I need you to know something, he said. These weeks with you, talking to you, watching you explore the house, seeing you smile when you find a book you love. It has been— What? She whispered. Everything I never thought I would have. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she did not, he cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Charlotte, he breathed. She tilted her face up, her eyes closing. And then he stepped back. No, he said roughly. No, this is not right. Charlotte's eyes flew open. What? You deserve more than this. James moved away, running a hand through his hair. More than a marriage, of convenience to a man you barely know. You deserve courtship and choice and what if I choose this? Charlotte stood, her voice shaking. What if I choose you? You do not know me. Then let me know you. Charlotte, good night, Mr. Ashford, she said, suddenly cold. She walked to the door with as much dignity as she could muster, but her hands trembled as she grasped the handle. Charlotte, please. She left without looking back. James stood alone in the library and cursed himself for a coward. The next morning was strained. Charlotte kept to her room until mid-morning, and when she emerged, James was already gone. Mrs. Dawson mentioned that he had business in London, and would Charlotte like to accompany him? London? Charlotte asked. Yes, ma'am. He takes the trip regularly. I am sure he would be glad of the company. Charlotte hesitated. After last night's awkwardness, perhaps time apart would be wiser. But she had not left Surrey since arriving, and the thought of seeing the city again, even briefly, was appealing. Yes, she said. I would like that. James seemed surprised when she joined him at the carriage, but he handed her up without comment. They set off in a silence that was far more uncomfortable than their first journey together. I apologize for last evening, James said finally. I spoke out of turn. You were honest, Charlotte replied, looking out the window. There is no need to apologize for honesty. Still, James, where in London are we going? I have some business matters to attend to. I thought perhaps you might enjoy visiting some shops while I am occupied. Charlotte frowned. What sort of business? Property matters, he said vaguely. Nothing that would interest you. The carriage rolled through the countryside, and Charlotte tried not to feel hurt by his evasiveness. They were not truly husband and wife, not in any real sense. He owed her no explanations. But as they entered London proper, something began to feel wrong. They were not heading toward the commercial districts or the modest areas where a farmer might have business. They were heading toward Mayfair. James? She said slowly. Where are we going? I told you I have business in Mayfair. She turned to stare at him. James, what business does a farmer have in Mayfair? His expression was grim. Charlotte. The carriage turned onto a tree-lined street of elegant townhouses. And then it stopped, in front of a mansion. Charlotte's heart began to pound. "James, why are we stopping here?" The carriage door opened. A liveried footman appeared, his face professionally neutral. "Welcome home, Sir James," he said. The world tilted. Sir James. Charlotte turned slowly to look at her husband. "What did he call you?" James closed his eyes. "Charlotte, I can explain. Sir James," she repeated, her voice rising. "He called you Sir James, and this—" She gestured to the mansion, to the servants now emerging from the door, to the obvious wealth surrounding them. "What is this?" "This is my home," James said quietly. "My London residence." Charlotte could not breathe. "Your residence? You are a baronet?" "Yes." "And you own this?" She laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "You own this mansion, in Mayfair?" "Charlotte, please let me guess." She interrupted, anger flooding through her now. "You own other properties too. The house in Surrey is just one of many. You are not a poor farmer. You never were." "No. You lied to me." "I never lied," James said quickly. You simply let me believe something that was not true. You let me think you were barely surviving, that you needed this marriage as desperately as I did." Charlotte heard her voice break, and hated herself for it. "You tested me, like she tested you, but in reverse. You wanted to see if I was a fortune hunter, so you pretended to be poor." "Charlotte, do not." She held up a hand, tears streaming down her face now. "Do not insult me by denying it. That is exactly what you did. You took the one thing I had left, the one shred of dignity, and you made it into a game." James reached for her. "It was not a game. I swear to you, I believed you." The words tore out of her. "I believed you when you said we were the same. I thought you understood what it meant to have no choice, to be desperate and trapped, and I chose you anyway, James. I chose you even when I thought you had nothing, and you made that into a lie." "Charlotte, please, I want my own room," she said, her voice cold now. "In your house, with a lock on the door, and I want you to stay away from me." "Charlotte, now, James, or I will walk out of this carriage and you will never see me again." James looked at her, anguish written across his face. Then he nodded once, sharply, and called to the servants. Charlotte was shown to a bedroom suite that was larger than the entire ground floor of her father's house. She locked the door behind her, sank to the floor, and wept. Charlotte did not leave her room for the rest of that day or through the night. Servants brought food that she did not eat. Someone, Mrs. Dawson, she thought, knocked softly and asked if there was anything she needed. Charlotte did not answer. She sat by the window and watched the street below, the elegant carriages passing, the well-dressed people living their well-ordered lives, and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. She had been humiliated before, by poverty, by her aunt, by circumstances beyond her control. But this was different. This was betrayal. James had seen into her heart, had understood her vulnerability, and he had used it. No, that was not quite right. As the night wore on and her anger cooled, Charlotte forced herself to be honest. James had not used her. He had not demanded anything from her, had not treated her unkindly. He had simply withheld the truth, out of fear, the same fear that had made her build walls around her heart, the same fear that had made her expect cruelty when kindness was offered. But knowing his reasons did not erase the hurt. It did not change the fact that their entire marriage had been built on a deception. Morning came. Charlotte washed her face, dressed in one of the simple gowns that had been sent ahead from her aunt's house, and prepared to leave. She would go to her aunt, no, not there, perhaps to a friend if any remained. Or she would find work, somehow. She would not stay where she was not wanted, where she had been merely a test. She unlocked the door and descended the grand staircase, her plan clear in her mind. She would find James, demand an annulment, and leave with what remained of her dignity. She found him in the library. He was sitting at a desk, head in his hands, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. He had not slept, she realized. He looked up as she entered, and the devastation in his face nearly broke her resolve. "Charlotte," he said, standing quickly, "please, let me." "I want an annulment," she said flatly. "I assume you can arrange it." "Yes." His voice was hoarse. "Yes, I can arrange it, and I will provide you with a settlement, a house of your own, whatever you— I do not want your money." "Charlotte, please, you cannot—" "I can and I will," she interrupted. "I will not be bought, James. Not by my aunt, not by you, not by anyone." James flinched as if struck. "I never meant to buy you, I swear it." "Then what did you mean?" she demanded. "Explain it to me, because I cannot understand. You have wealth, position, everything. Why deceive someone like me? What possible purpose could it serve?" "Because I am a coward," James said quietly. "Because I was terrified of being used again." "So you used me instead?" "No." He stepped toward her, then stopped. "Charlotte, please, let me explain, all of it." She said nothing, but she did not leave. James took a shaky breath. "When Elizabeth left me, my former fiancée, it destroyed something in me. I began to see calculation everywhere. Every woman who smiled at me, I wondered if she was counting my fortune. Every conversation felt like a negotiation. I became cold, cynical. So you decided to test me. I decided I wanted truth." He ran a hand through his hair. "When Mr. Pemberton told me about your situation, I saw an opportunity. A marriage of pure convenience. No pretense, no deception. I thought if I presented myself as a man of modest means, then you could not possibly want me for money. And perhaps, in time, we might build something real." "That is still deception, James." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know, and I have no excuse. But Charlotte, please believe me when I say this. I never expected to feel anything for you. I thought this would be a practical arrangement, nothing more." Charlotte's throat tightened, but she said nothing. "And then you walked into that office," James continued, "and you were not what I expected. You did not simper or flatter. You were honest, brutally so. You signed those papers with your eyes wide open, no illusions, and I thought, here is someone real. I was desperate. You were brave." He took another step closer. "You were facing ruin, humiliation, the loss of everything you had known, and you faced it with your head high. You did not beg or make excuses. You simply did what you had to do." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "And that made me suitable for your experiment?" "No, that made me want to know you." James's voice dropped lower. "And then I did know you. I watched you discover the library, saw your face light up when you found books you loved. I listened to you talk about your dreams, your father, the life you wanted. I saw you be kind to Mrs. Dawson, gentle with the gardens, curious about everything." He stopped, his hands clenched at his sides. "I fell in love with you, Charlotte. Somewhere between the solicitor's office and last night, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. And when I realized what I had done, that I had poisoned everything with my own fear and dishonesty, it was too late." Silence fell. Charlotte could hear her own heartbeat, rapid and unsteady. "You cannot love me," she whispered. "You do not know me. You know the woman who thought you were poor. That is not who I am in this world." "Isn't it?" James asked softly. "Do you become a different person in this house? Did you change the moment you learned the truth? No, but you are still the woman who chose me when you thought I had nothing. You are still the woman who defended me against a fiancé you never met. You are still brave and honest and far too good for me." He took a breath. And I am still the man who offered you his coat, who listened to your dreams, who wanted nothing more than to make you smile. Charlotte shook her head, tears falling now. That man lived in Surrey. I do not know who you are in London. Then I will leave London, James said immediately. We will go back to Surrey. We will live in that house, and I will farm the lands myself if that is what you want. I do not care about this mansion or my title or any of it. I only care about you. James, I am not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I know what I did was wrong, but I am asking for a chance to earn your trust, however long it takes, whatever I must do. He crossed the room, and, to Charlotte's shock, dropped to his knees before her. I cannot ask you to marry me. We are already married, he said, looking up at her with raw honesty in his eyes. But I am asking if you will let me love you, truly, this time. No more secrets, no more tests, just us. Two people who both know what it is to be hurt, trying to find something real. Charlotte looked down at him. This man who owned half of London, on his knees in his own library, offering her everything. Stand up, she whispered. Charlotte, stand up, James. He rose, slowly, uncertainty written across his face. You said we were the same, Charlotte said, her voice shaking. That day in the solicitor's office, do you remember? Yes. You were right. We are both prisoners. You of your past, me of my circumstances. She reached out, hesitantly, and touched his face. But perhaps prisoners can choose to be free. Hope flared in his eyes. Charlotte? I did not fall in love with a farmer, she said slowly, choosing each word carefully. I fell in love with a man who treated me as if I mattered, who asked what I thought and listened to my answers, who made me feel, for the first time in my life, as if I was enough exactly as I am. You are more than enough, James breathed. You are everything. Is that man here? Charlotte asked. In this house, or did he only exist in Surrey? In answer, James stepped back and removed his jacket, draping it over her shoulders just as he had done in the carriage weeks ago. He is right here, James said softly, and he is a fool who loves you more than his own life. Charlotte pulled the jacket closer, breathing in the familiar scent. I fell in love with you too, she admitted. I did not want to. I tried not to. But watching you in the library, listening to you talk, seeing the kindness you tried to hide, I could not help it. Charlotte. James cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. I swear to you, no more secrets, no more tests. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I chose you, not because you were desperate, but because you are extraordinary. And I chose you, Charlotte said, not because you could save me, but because you made me want to be saved. We saved each other, James whispered. Then kiss me, Charlotte said, not as a farmer to a desperate woman, not as a baronet to his convenient wife, but as James to Charlotte, as equals. He kissed her, and it was nothing like Charlotte had imagined a kiss would be. It was soft and fierce and devastating. It tasted of tears and truth and second chances. When they parted, Charlotte rested her forehead against his. I have one condition, she said. Anything. You promised me honesty, so I want to know everything. Why you hide your wealth, why you test people, all of it. Done, James said immediately. And I have a condition too. What? You said you wanted to see Rome, Athens, Egypt. I want to take you there, not as a husband fulfilling an obligation, but as a man showing the world to the woman he loves. Charlotte laughed, the sound watery but genuine. That is not a condition. That is a bribe. Then I am shameless, James said, smiling for the first time since yesterday. Say yes, Charlotte. Say you will stay. Say you will let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him, at the hope and fear and love written across his face, at the man who had knelt before her and offered everything. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, promise, a future neither of them had dared to imagine. When they finally parted, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For choosing me, even when you thought I was no one, even when you learned the truth. Thank you for choosing me anyway." "Always," Charlotte said. "I choose you always." 3 weeks later, Charlotte stood in the gardens of the Mayfair mansion, watching the late afternoon sun paint everything gold. The flowers were beginning their autumn fade, but the roses still bloomed, crimson and white against the green. She had insisted on learning everything. James had been true to his word, hiding nothing. He owned 17 properties across England, had investments in railways and shipping, sat on the boards of 3 charitable foundations. The modest house in Surrey was, he confessed with embarrassment, where he went when London society became too suffocating. "I bought it 5 years ago," he had told her one evening as they sat together in the library. "Their library now," he insisted. "After Elizabeth, I needed somewhere that felt real, somewhere I could simply be James, not Sir James, not the wealthy bachelor every matchmaking mama wanted for her daughter." "And were you lonely?" Charlotte had asked. "Desperately," he admitted. "But I convinced myself it was better than being used. And now I have you, and I am done being alone." They had returned to Surrey twice since the revelation, and Charlotte was beginning to understand James's attachment to the place. The simplicity of it, the quiet. It was a refuge, and she was grateful he had shared it with her first. But London had its charms too. James had introduced her to his world slowly, carefully. Dinners with close friends, visits to museums and theatres, walks through parks. He was protective without being possessive, always watching to ensure she was comfortable. "You do not have to do any of this," he told her repeatedly. "If you wish to live quietly in Surrey, we can do that." But Charlotte was discovering that she did not want to hide. She had spent too long being invisible, dismissed, forgotten. Here, on James's arm, people saw her. More importantly, James saw her, and that made all the difference. Mrs. Dawson had moved to the London house to serve as housekeeper, and her warm presence made the mansion feel less intimidating. She had taken one look at Charlotte and James upon their return from Surrey and smiled knowingly. "About time," was all she said. Now Charlotte heard footsteps behind her and turned to find James approaching, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "Hiding from me?" he asked, offering her a glass. "Thinking," she corrected, accepting it. "About?" Charlotte took a sip, considering. "About how strange life is. 3 months ago I was sitting in a solicitor's office, signing away my future. I thought I was losing everything. And now?" She looked at him, her husband, her love, her choice. "Now I think perhaps I found everything instead." James set down his glass and pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They stood together, watching the sun sink lower. "Charlotte," he said after a while. "Yes?" "Mrs. Dawson told me something interesting today. She said you have been asking about the charitable foundations I am involved with." Charlotte felt herself flush. "I was simply curious." "She also said you have been discussing education programs for young women, specifically those from families in financial distress. I thought—" Charlotte stopped, uncertain. "I thought perhaps I might be useful, if you do not mind." James turned her in his arms, his expression serious. Mind? Charlotte, I would be honored. These foundations exist because I wanted to do something meaningful with my wealth. But I have been working alone for so long, I had forgotten what it meant to have a partner. He kissed her forehead. You have ideas. Use them. Change things. Make the world better. I will support you in every way I can. Truly. Truly. Besides, he added with a smile, you are far more clever than I am. These foundations will probably be more effective with you running them. Charlotte laughed. I would not go that far. I would. He grew serious again. Charlotte, I meant what I said. Everything I have is yours. Not because you are my wife, but because I trust you, because I believe in you. Use it however you see fit. She reached up and kissed him, pouring gratitude and love into the gesture. When they parted, she said quietly, I received a letter today, from my sister. Oh? James's expression was careful. They had not discussed Charlotte's family much since the wedding. She is with our aunt still. She says... Charlotte's voice wavered. She says she is glad I am settled, that she hopes I am not too unhappy. What did you write back? I told her the truth, that I am happier than I ever imagined I could be. Charlotte looked up at him. And I invited her to visit, if that is all right. Of course it is all right. Charlotte, this is your home. Your family is always welcome. Even my aunt? James made a face. If we must. Charlotte laughed despite herself. You are terrible. I am honest, he corrected. Your aunt treated you abominably. I have not forgiven her for that, and I am not certain I ever will. But if you wish to extend an olive branch, I will support you. I do not wish to extend anything to my aunt, Charlotte admitted. But my sister is innocent in all this. She should not suffer because I am angry. Then we will invite her, for as long as she wishes to stay. James brushed a strand of hair from Charlotte's face. You have the kindest heart of anyone I have ever known. I am not kind. I am pragmatic. You can be both. He pulled her closer. That is one of the many things I love about you. How many things are there? Charlotte asked, teasing. Now. Infinite. James replied seriously. I discover new ones every day. The sun had nearly set, the sky now a deep purple streaked with orange. Somewhere in the house, Charlotte could hear Mrs. Dawson calling to one of the maids, the comfortable sounds of a home being tended. James, Charlotte said softly. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to be foolish. She turned in his arms to face him fully. For testing me, even though it was wrong, because if you had not, I never would have known that someone could choose me for myself. Not my family, not my prospects, just me. James's eyes shone with emotion. Charlotte Ashford, I would choose you in any circumstance, in any life, rich or poor, titled or common. I would always choose you. And I would always choose you, she replied. My farmer, my baronet, my James. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they parted, both were smiling. Shall we go inside? James asked. Mrs. Dawson mentioned something about roast duck for dinner. In a moment. Charlotte leaned against him, his coat warm around her shoulders. He had placed it there without thinking, a habit now. I want to stay here a little longer, with you. As long as you like. James murmured against her hair. I am not going anywhere. And so they stood together in the garden as night fell over London, two people who had come together out of necessity and found, against all odds, something neither had been looking for. Love, partnership, home. Charlotte thought of that day in the solicitor's office, of the woman she had been, desperate, hopeless, certain she was losing everything. She thought of the contract she had signed, the simple gold band that now rested on her finger. She had expected to lose herself in that marriage. Instead, she had found herself, and in doing so, she had found him. "Charlotte," James said, his voice rumbling against her back. "Yes, I love you." She smiled into the gathering darkness. "I know, and I love you too, even though I am impossibly wealthy and own half of London. Especially because you are impossibly wealthy," Charlotte said solemnly. "It means I can buy as many books as I want." James laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Mercenary woman." "You married me," Charlotte pointed out. "Best decision I ever made," he replied, and standing there, wrapped in his arms, surrounded by the city that was now hers, Charlotte could only agree. She had signed a contract expecting nothing. She had gained everything.